Have you ever wondered how just one small thing, barely a ripple, can make your whole old age feel unsteady, as if you'd never truly found your footing in life? It's not your health, and it's not about money. Sometimes it's just an empty chair, where someone once read the newspaper every quiet afternoon. There are things we barely noticed when they were still here, but only when they're gone do we realize. Growing old doesn't require much, only to hold on to 5 quiet things, and in doing so, hold on to ourselves. If these words gently stirred something within you, leave a comment sharing one thing you're treasuring most at this stage of life. And if you'd like to walk alongside stories made for the elder within you, or someone you love, consider subscribing to this space for the quiet ones, the remembering ones, the ones still becoming. There are some mornings when the sky holds no rain, yet you still hear the soft drip of something just outside the porch. It's the sound of Mrs. Eleanor stirring her tea with a silver spoon in a chipped porcelain cup she never had the heart to throw away since the day her husband passed. She once said it wasn't because of the cup, it was because every morning needs a familiar sound to remind her that she's still here. Lately, she forgets to turn off the kettle, and she no longer walks down the stairs in one steady go. But she doesn't call it old age. She simply says, maybe my thoughts are wandering somewhere else, so my feet slow down a little to catch up. Dear elder friend, sometimes stability isn't found in memory or a steady heartbeat. It's found in something quieter, in the calm that lets you smile even when the kettle boils over, instead of scolding yourself for forgetting. That is the first pillar you can still hold on to, a steady heart, even as everything around begins to shift. I remember a man named Franklin, 77 years old, who had just moved into a retirement home in Northern Virginia. No one in the new neighborhood knew that he had once been a jazz musician. Not until he sat beneath the maple tree at the edge of the courtyard, turned on an old radio, and gently tapped rhythm on his knee. Only then did people begin to draw near. Franklin never tried to make friends. He simply brought with him the things that kept him grounded. A cup of coffee brewed for exactly 3 minutes, an old handkerchief embroidered by his late wife, and the sound of a saxophone inside his soul. No need to play it out loud, no fuss, no denial, no complaints. And somehow, it was that quietness that made people feel safe around him. Because sometimes all it takes is one person, sitting there, unhurried, unbothered, not reacting, to make the rest of us feel like we can breathe too. Keep your heart unrushed, not to prove anything, but to remember this: you still have the power to choose how you respond to life, no matter your age. Maybe today, something small upset you, a comment that didn't sit right, a meal that wasn't as warm as usual. Try not to react right away. Just sit for one more minute. Close your eyes, play an old song. It might not fix everything, but it might help you keep something far more precious than being right. A quiet heart. And someone with a quiet heart, even with trembling steps, is still the strongest pillar in the house of growing old. After her quiet morning tea, Mrs. Eleanor would often rise, slowly, not because of pain, but because she wanted to listen, to see where, if anywhere, her body might want to take her that day. There's something deeply quiet that anyone over 70 begins to feel. Stepping out onto the porch by yourself each morning. That is a kind of freedom. No one lifting you, no one steadying your arm, just the familiar feel of old slippers, the soft creak of wood beneath your feet, and the quiet knowing. I still have say in how I move through this life, dear elder friend. The ability to walk, to sit up, to hold a towel in your own hands. These may seem small, but they're the doorways that keep your world from shrinking. As long as your feet can carry you to the garden, your heart can still carry you to where your grandchildren play. I once met a woman named Margaret, 81 years old, living alone in a small river town called Chesterton. Her home was a single-story cottage, modest and peaceful. Yet every morning you'd hear the scrape of a chair, because she still preferred to set it up on the porch herself just to catch the sun, rather than have someone else do it for her. Each morning she did a few simple stretches, a reach of the arm, a tilt of the neck, a bend of the knees, barely 10 minutes, but consistent, as if it were a quiet ritual to keep her spirit awake. She once told me, "I'm not trying to feel young again. I just want to still be able to reach a lemon when I want to pick one." Dear one, a body that trembles, a body that slows, can still respond to the gentle command of your own will. And that is a gift worth holding on to. The beautiful truth is, to keep that gift, you don't need to do anything grand. You only need to listen to your body as you would an old friend. Shoulders stiff today? Let's roll them once gently. Knees aching? We'll walk slower, but still walk. Heart racing on the stairs? Let's rest on the third step and look out the window for a while. No rush, no force, no comparison. Because the goal isn't to become who you once were. It's to keep becoming who you are today. So if today you brewed your own tea, chose your own shoes, or simply turned the key in your own front door, smile a little, because these are the small acts that keep your dignity standing tall, even if your back is starting to curve. After so many years of serving us, our body now only asks that we walk alongside it, gently and with sincerity. Don't underestimate the power of slow steps, because it is through them you remain the master of every room in your life. That afternoon, Mrs. Eleanor slipped on her soft sandals and walked to the market near her home. She didn't buy much, just a bundle of celery, a few apples, and a box of new tea her granddaughter once mentioned was good for the heart. When she opened her wallet, she paused, not because she was short on money, but because she still had the habit of counting which bills were older, which ones she'd received the previous month. She used to be an accountant, and even though she'd been retired for nearly 20 years, there was still a quiet joy in knowing she was in control of her spending, in her own gentle way. Dear elder friend, financial peace doesn't come from the number in your account. It comes from knowing you're living within your means and still able to choose how you want to live. I remember Mr. Harrison, 78 years old, living in a small town called Maple Ridge. He used to work at the post office. Not rich, not poor, but always enough. Enough to not worry when a light bulb went out. Enough to treat an old friend to coffee on a weekend. Enough to stay warm through winter, because he started preparing in summer. Every month he hand-wrote a simple chart and stuck it to his fridge. Income, expenses, what's left, and a little for joy. The word joy was always there. Some months it meant a new shirt. Other months a bus ticket to visit his son. And sometimes just an old book, because he remembered a line he never got to write down. No one ever told him to do this. He just believed one simple thing. Money won't make you live longer, but it helps you live without fear. To the one listening now, you may have lived through seasons where every penny had to be carefully wrapped. But if today you can still choose your meals, buy a small gift, or call a ride to the hospital without waiting for someone else to pay, that's not just finances. That is freedom in its quietest form. You may not call it security, but if your wallet isn't always full, yet still allows you to share a meal, send a bag of oranges to a sick neighbor, or set something aside for when your grandchild visits next, then you are still someone who gives, not just someone who receives. And that is the dignity of a life well lived. A life that knows how to keep, how to use, and how to let go at the right time. Financial peace doesn't mean never worrying. It means that when worries come, you know you've already prepared. And as Mr. Harrison once said, as long as I can still choose to spend on the tea I love, life has never stopped being sweet. That afternoon, the rain was gentle. Mrs. Eleanor sat alone in her kitchen, her hands resting on a cup of tea that had already cooled. On the table, a worn photo frame reflected the face of her late husband. Beside it, a handkerchief still waiting to be washed. It wasn't that she didn't feel sadness. It's just that her sorrow no longer burned like it once did. It had become like a soft tide, still returning each evening, but no longer sweeping everything away. Dear elder friend, growing old doesn't make us weaker. It simply brings into focus the things we've never fully faced. There will be days when you might feel the world quietly stepping back, children more and more preoccupied, friends growing fewer, loved ones slowly leaving. But even through all this change, if there is one thing you still hold on to, your heart will not come undone. and that is emotional strength. Let me tell you about Grace, 84, who lives on the outskirts of New Hampshire. Her husband passed away 7 years ago. Her son lives in another state. The little house is now filled only with the voice of the radio and books she's read 3 times over. The neighborhood loves her. Every morning she's seen walking her dog. Every evening someone lingers by her fence just to hear her tell an old story. People say she's handled it so well, but the truth is, she never really moved on. She simply chose to stay with her sorrow, her longing, and her loneliness, treating them as quiet guests in her soul. She once said, "I don't need to chase away what I've lost. It's enough that each morning I still brush my own hair, make my own tea, and smile at the reflection that's still here." To you, the one listening, strength doesn't always show up in boldness. Sometimes it's simply the ability to sit still when grief tightens your chest, to smile softly at the memory of someone who's gone, and to keep living without closing your heart. Strength is choosing not to react with hurt, but with understanding. Not to shut down, but to gently decide what you still allow in. And the beautiful thing is, this kind of strength doesn't need to be built ahead of time. It can arrive in the quietest of days. The day you forgave a careless word, the day you wrote a letter, unsure if it would be received, or simply the day you chose to stay silent, not to give up, but to make yourself a warmer cup of tea. So if today you've carried a loss and still found it in you to open the window and let the light in, please know this: you are not fragile. You are the light that remains at the end of a long, beautiful day. In the late afternoon, Mrs. Eleanor sat by the window knitting a scarf. Outside, the neighbors' children were playing ring toss. Their laughter floated through the air, then faded behind the thin wall. She didn't call out. She didn't wave. She just sat and smiled. Because maybe, just maybe, the simple feeling of still being part of that world, even only as a quiet observer, was already enough. Dear friend who is listening, after all the things we try to hold on to, our calm, our bodies, our finances, our steady hearts, there remains one thing that is so delicate, and yet if it slips away, we begin to drift from life like a nameless leaf on the wind. It is the feeling of being needed by someone, of still being one link, however small, in someone's circle. Many call it connection, but at this age I call it the feeling of belonging. I once met Mr. Walter, 86 years old, in a quiet lakeside town in the western US. He lived alone, no children or grandchildren, but every day he walked to the public library. He didn't read much, just sat at his usual table, wore his headphones, flipped through a few pages, and always greeted the librarians by name. One day I asked him, "What brings you here every day?" He smiled gently and said, "So someone knows I'm still alive today." Not everyone needs to be embraced. Not everyone needs to be checked on daily. But we all need to be remembered, even if only by a familiar glance. Sometimes you don't have to do anything grand. Just open your window each morning so the neighbor knows you're up with the sun. Wear a slightly nicer shirt to the store because you know the cashier will smile and greet you. Leave a handwritten thank you for the person who delivers your mail, or nod to the one walking their dog past your gate. No one may say it aloud, but the heart always remembers these quiet threads of connection. And when you still hold on to that thread, however thin, you're still holding your place in the fabric of life. Belonging doesn't require that someone love you fiercely. Sometimes it's simply being thought of, gently, silently, with kindness. And more importantly, it's you still thinking of others, with a heart that hasn't closed its door. So if today you live alone, but still remember your daughter-in-law's birthday, still save a treat for your grandchild's next visit, or still set out a pair of chopsticks for a friend who has passed, then please know this: you have never fallen from the arms of life. Because the feeling of belonging doesn't come from the number of people around you. It comes from a space in your heart that remains open for someone to walk into. The next morning, Mrs. Eleanor woke earlier than usual. The tea hadn't been brewed. The scarf remained unfinished, but she stood for a long time by the window, gazing out at the backyard. There in that quiet patch of garden, there used to be an old wooden chair. her husband's favorite spot to read the newspaper. After he passed, she never placed the chair back out there. Not because she forgot, but because she couldn't quite bring herself to. Yet that morning she carried out a different chair, by her own hands, not to replace the one that was gone, but simply so someone, maybe even herself, could still sit there and continue. Dear friend listening, sometimes returning doesn't mean going back to the past. It means beginning again, right where something once stopped, with eyes that have seen much and still wish to keep looking. After all the pillars you've moved through, inner calm, a responsive body, financial peace, emotional strength, the quiet thread of belonging. If there is one small thing you can do today, please do it. Not to prove anything, but simply to remind yourself you're still living, not just existing. I once met an elder named Samuel, 90 years old, a retired literature teacher from Oregon. After retiring, he went 2 whole years without opening a book. He told me, "My eyes aren't what they used to be, and I no longer have students to read aloud to." Then one day, his granddaughter left behind a children's book on his bed. Large print, illustrations. Instead of tidying it away, he opened it, just to read a little, not for her, but for himself. From that day on, he read 3 pages each day, not to remember, but to feel again. Each word, each paragraph, like an old friend returning in a gentler form. You don't have to travel far. You don't need to do something grand. But if today you place a photo back on the shelf, wipe the dust from a familiar book, or write a short note to someone you haven't called in a while, please know that is a kind of return with new eyes. You don't need to change your life. You only need to accept that. You can keep living, just in a different way. After she set the new chair in the garden, Mrs. Eleanor didn't make her tea right away. Instead, she pulled out an old blanket, one her husband used to use, and draped it gently across the chair's back. No one told her to do that. She just felt, if a seat could still be kept, then a memory could still have a place to rest. There are days when we can't go far, but if we shift our gaze, even slightly, the old world begins to change its color. That afternoon, the air turned cool. No rain, no sunshine. The kind of weather elders often describe as a day that doesn't ask for anything, except that we slow down, just a little. Mrs. Eleanor didn't do much. She simply sat on the chair she had placed back in the garden, the spot where her husband used to sit when he was still alive. A half-knitted scarf rested on her lap. The crochet hook lay still. Her hands touched it gently, as if touching a memory, not just a strand of yarn. In the distance, the trees behind the house began shedding their leaves. Softly, no warning, no sound. Just quietly, like a farewell that needs no words. Dear elder friend, if you've walked with us this far, perhaps there is nothing more that needs to be said. Because what needs to be kept, you already know. And what needs to be released, you are learning to loosen your grip day by day. Aging is not the slow fading of who we are. It is the gentle holding on to what matters most. Maybe it's a morning where you cook an old dish, even if there's only one seat at the table. Maybe it's an old melody you hum while folding blankets, even if no one's around to hear it. Maybe it's a quiet act, threading a needle, pouring warm water into a teacup, or pulling the curtain open, just enough to let the light in. One more time. And maybe, like Mrs. Eleanor, it's adding just one more stitch to an unfinished scarf. Not to finish it, but simply so tomorrow. There's still something to continue. No one knows who that scarf will be for, but as long as her hands still want to weave it, then she still has a reason to be here. We're not asking you to change anything grand. Only this: please don't let anyone, not even yourself, convince you that growing old is the ending of a story. Because sometimes it's in the final lines where the soul of a thread is held. Because sometimes someone simply sitting there, in stillness, is already a quiet prayer for the world. The frame closes, no dramatic music, only the soft sound of leaves brushing against the roof and the last light of day spilling gently across the scarf, growing slowly beneath her hands. There is nothing more that needs to be said. A life message to you who have walked through many seasons of life. Your hands may tremble now, your vision may have softened, but the light within you, it has never dimmed. Because no one can ever take away what you have loved, what you have protected, what you have quietly sacrificed through the passing years. Growing old is not the end. It is the gentle pause that lets you look back and realize you are still tender enough to go on living. Perhaps slower, perhaps simpler, but always truly. Thank you for still being here, for still listening, and for continuing to hold a quiet kind of beauty in this world. The beauty of resilience, of living memory, and of a heart that has never stopped being warm.